She doesn't actually contribute anything, does she? My brother-in-law said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. Like, what exactly does she bring to this family? Nobody corrected him. My mother-in-law laughed. That soft, indulgent laugh she saved for things he said that she pretended were jokes but never were. My husband stared at his plate. I set my wine glass down slowly. Not because I was angry. Because something inside me had just gone very, very quiet. My name is Reeve Holloway. I'm 31 years old. I work as a financial analyst at a mid-size firm in Mississauga. And for the past 4 years, I have been the invisible infrastructure holding my husband's entire family together. They called it being generous. I called it being taken for granted so consistently that it started to feel like my actual job description. We were sitting at the long dining table in my mother-in-law's house in Burlington, the one I'd helped her refinish after the basement flooded and she couldn't afford a contractor. Every seat was full. My brother-in-law, his girlfriend, my sister-in-law and her husband, assorted cousins who showed up whenever someone else was cooking. My husband's family did Sunday dinners the way other families did business meetings, structured, hierarchical, and always with an unspoken agenda. I'd made the lasagna, 2 full pans, from scratch, because my mother-in-law mentioned offhand on Thursday that she was tired. I'd also brought 2 bottles of Niagara Peninsula Red and a dessert from the Portuguese bakery in Port Credit that everyone loved but no one ever thought to pick up themselves. I'm serious, my brother-in-law continued. His name was Theo, and he had the particular confidence of someone who had never once been told no by anyone who loved him. You've got your little job, sure. But this family ran fine before you showed up. My husband, his name was Joel, put his hand on my arm, not to defend me, to keep me quiet. That was the moment, not the words. The hand. I looked at the screen of my phone sitting face down beside my plate. 3 months ago I had set a reminder. A very specific reminder. I knew, on some level, that things had been building toward something. I just hadn't known what form it would take. Now I did. I picked up my fork and finished my dinner. I smiled at the right times. I helped clear the table. I drove home in silence while Joel said he thought Theo was just tired from work and I should try not to take it personally. I didn't argue. I was already thinking about everything I needed to do the next morning. I hadn't always been this precise about things. 4 years ago, when Joel and I first got serious, I thought his family's closeness was something beautiful. They called each other constantly. They showed up for each other. His mother, Barbara, was warm and funny, and made me feel included in a way my own family, scattered and cool, never quite had. What I didn't understand yet was that being included, in this family, had a price tag, and I was going to be the one paying it. It started small. Joel's truck needed new brakes. He'd had a rough month at work. Could I spot him until his next paycheck? Of course. His mother's furnace broke in January. The house was freezing. Could we help cover the repair? We did. Theo needed someone to co-sign a personal line of credit because his own credit score was, in his words, a bit of a disaster right now. Joel asked me. I said yes because I loved my husband, and I believed him when he said Theo was turning things around. Theo was not turning things around. Over 4 years, I tracked it all. Not obsessively, just carefully. The way you track anything that involves your financial security. The total, across everything. Just over $34,000. Some of it was direct transfers. Some of it was absorbed costs. Groceries, repairs, gifts, a weekend at a cottage in Muskoka that Joel's family decided to book and somehow assumed we'd split 4 ways even though only 2 of us had stable incomes. Some of it was the line of credit I co-signed, which Theo had made 11 payments on before quietly stopping. Joel knew about some of it. Not all of it. He knew the way people know things they prefer not to examine too closely. The Sunday of the dinner, I drove home and said nothing. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table in our condo in Mississauga, and I opened a spreadsheet I'd built 6 months earlier. Quietly, methodically, after a particularly exhausting Christmas where I'd bought all the gifts for his side of the family, and his mother had thanked him for them. I updated one column, then I made a phone call to my financial advisor. Then I sent an email to a lawyer whose name I'd gotten from a colleague. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in months. The calls started 2 days later. Joel's mother called first. She'd heard, from Theo, apparently, that I seemed upset at dinner. Was everything okay? She hoped I knew that Theo was just being Theo and didn't mean anything by it. I said I was fine. I thanked her for checking in. I kept my voice warm and level. Joel tried to talk to me that evening. He sat across from me at the kitchen island and said, "You've been weird since Sunday." I told him I'd been busy at work. He accepted this because it was easier than asking more questions. On Thursday, Theo called. I almost didn't pick up. I did anyway. "Hey, so I got a notice from the lender about the line of credit," he said. "Did something happen on your end?" "What kind of notice?" I asked, though I already knew. "Like, a review notice. They're asking about the cosigner situation. Can you just call them and tell them everything's fine?" "I can't do that," I said. Silence. "Then, what do you mean you can't?" "I've taken steps to have my name removed from that account, Theo. It's in process. You'll need to either qualify on your own or find a different cosigner." His voice changed immediately. The easy confidence cracked open, and underneath it was something raw and unprepared. "You can't just— I'm not going to qualify on my own, you know that. Why would you do this? Right now?" "I didn't make any payment stop," I said. "You did, 11 months ago." He hung up. Joel called me 4 times that afternoon. I let them go to voicemail. When I came home, he was sitting in the living room with the specific energy of someone who has been waiting, rehearsing. Theo, Theo says you're pulling out of the line of credit. I'm having my name removed." "Yes, you can't just do that without telling anyone." I sat down across from him. "I'm telling you now. That's not Reeve. He could go to collections over this. His credit is already a mess." "I know. That's the consequence of not making payments for 11 months. Joel stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. The version of me he'd been married to wouldn't have done this. She'd made another exception, found another way to absorb the fallout. "My mom is going to be upset," he said finally. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry about that." I wasn't really. But I'd learned that saying it made the next part easier. The part where I held my ground anyway. The real confrontation didn't happen in our condo. It happened at a birthday lunch for Joel's sister, a reservation at a restaurant in downtown Hamilton that I'd helped organize and paid the deposit on 3 weeks earlier, before the Sunday dinner, before I'd made my decisions. I went anyway, not to smooth things over. To see clearly. We were halfway through our mains when Barbara set down her fork and looked at me with the expression she used when she was about to say something she'd decided in advance was reasonable. "I think we need to address what's happening," she said. "As a family." Heads turned. I kept eating. "Reeve has decided to create some distance," she continued, "to the table, not specifically to me. I think we all feel it. And I want us to be able to talk about it openly." Theo, sitting across from me, had the grace to look at his plate. His girlfriend didn't know where to look either. Joel's sister, Meg, she'd always been the quieter one, the observer, watched me carefully. "She's pulling financial support," Theo said, "without any warning, after everything this family has done for her." I put my fork down. I opened my bag. I'd brought a folder, just a slim one, manila, nothing dramatic, and I took out 3 pages and placed them flat on the table. "I have the records here," I said, "if we're going to talk about everything this family has done." Silence. 4 years of transfers, co-signed debt, covered expenses, the amounts, the dates, the breakdown. I slid the pages toward the center of the table. "I'm not angry. I'm just not going to sit here and let the story get rewritten." Barbara looked at the pages the way people look at things they desperately don't want to be real. "You kept records?" Joel said quietly. I'm a financial analyst, I said. I keep records of everything. Meg picked up one of the pages. She scanned it. Something moved across her face, not the reaction I expected. She set it back down carefully. No one clapped. No one apologized. The lunch ended in 37 minutes and nobody ordered dessert. But in the parking lot, Meg caught up to me. I didn't know it was that much, she said. Most people didn't, I told her. She nodded slowly. What are you going to do? I already did it, I said, and I got in my car. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and went through everything I'd been quietly dismantling over the past 3 months. It was less explosive than it sounds. It was more like closing tabs, one by one, methodically. The way you clean out a space you've been meaning to deal with for years. The co-signed line of credit, in process of removal, pending lender review. The joint household account I'd let Joel's mother use, just for emergencies, for 18 months, closed. The automatic e-transfer I'd set up for Theo's temporary rent support 2 years ago, which had continued because I'd forgotten to cancel it, and nobody had mentioned it was still running. Canceled. The credit card Joel and I held jointly that his family had a supplementary card on, reported to cancel the supplementary, pending the 30-day notice period. None of this was illegal. None of it was cruel. It was just accurate. It was what reality looked like when I stopped padding it. I called my financial advisor the next morning, and we talked for an hour about what the next 6 months could look like if I redirected what I'd been sending outward. The numbers were almost embarrassing. Not because they were large, they weren't extravagant, but because of what they added up to, year over year, quietly, while I told myself it was what family meant. I circled a date on my calendar, not for anything dramatic, just for me. A marker. The fallout arrived in waves. Barbara left a voicemail saying she hoped I understood that what I was doing had consequences for everyone. Theo stopped returning Joel's calls, then started again when he needed a character reference for a new rental application, and somehow believed that Joel could still convince me. Meg texted me twice, once to ask if I was okay, once to ask if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said yes to both. Joel and I had the real conversation about 3 weeks after the Hamilton lunch. Not a fight, something more like an autopsy. We sat at the same kitchen island we'd sat at 100 times, and he said, I know I let a lot of things happen that I shouldn't have. I waited. I kept thinking you were okay with it, because you never said you weren't. I know, I said. That was my mistake too. Are we? He stopped, started again. Are we okay? I looked at the man I'd married. I thought about the hand on my arm at Sunday dinner. I thought about 4 years of voicemails he'd relayed and requests he'd passed along without filtering, and then the way he'd never once said, to his own brother, to his own mother, enough. I don't know yet, I said, and that was the most honest thing I'd said to him in a long time. We went to couples counseling. I want to be honest about that. The story doesn't end with a clean exit and a triumphant solo chapter. It's more complicated than that. What I did wasn't about leaving Joel. It was about stopping the version of our life that had been built on my capacity to absorb everything without breaking. But some things, once you see them, you can't stop seeing. The session where Joel finally admitted, out loud, to someone other than me, that he'd known about the automatic transfer to Theo for over a year, and hadn't told me. That was hard, not because it was a betrayal, exactly, but because of how casually he'd held that information, like it wasn't his to manage. The session where I admitted that I'd let myself become the solution to every problem, because it was easier than asking for what I actually needed. That was harder. We're still in it. I'm not going to wrap that part up neatly. What I can tell you is what changed for me. 3 months after Hamilton, I ran into Barbara at a grocery store in Burlington. I was visiting Meg, who lives in the West End now. Barbara looked startled, the way people do when they've spent time imagining you as smaller than you are and then encounter you in person and have to recalibrate. You look well, she said. I am, I said. She waited. There was a pause that I recognized, the pause where, in the old version of myself, I would have rushed to fill it. Would have asked about her knee, about the house, about Theo. Would have made it easy. I let the pause sit. I hope things settle down, she said finally. They already have, I told her, and I pushed my cart forward. I know what people will say when they hear a story like this. They'll say, why didn't she leave sooner? Why did she let it go so far? And I've thought about that a lot, sitting with the spreadsheet and the records and the lawyer's letter that spelled out exactly what I was and wasn't legally obligated to do. The answer isn't simple. It never is. I stayed because I loved my husband. I stayed because I'd confused reliability with love, and I'd built my sense of value around being the person who never needed anything, never cost anyone anything, never caused a problem. That's not a family dynamic. That's a job. And I was working overtime with no benefits and no overtime pay, and somehow convinced myself that the title of good wife and good daughter-in-law was compensation enough. It wasn't. Here's what I know now, practically, for anyone who's listening. In Canada, removing yourself from a co-signed loan or line of credit requires the lender's cooperation. They won't typically release you unless the primary borrower can qualify independently, or the debt is paid off, or you can demonstrate material change in circumstances. It's not fast, it's not easy, but it's possible, and starting the process matters, even if it takes time. Same with joint accounts, supplementary cards, any financial entanglement you've signed your name to on behalf of someone else's peace of mind. Get your name off what you can. Get documentation of everything you've contributed. Talk to a financial advisor and a family law lawyer before you do anything, because the order of operations matters. Not because you're planning war, because you deserve to know exactly what your position is. I went on a trip in April, solo, for the first time since I was 26, a week in Victoria, staying at a small inn in James Bay, walking along the waterfront in the mornings with coffee and a novel I'd been meaning to read for 2 years. It rained 3 of the 7 days, and I didn't care at all. I called Meg from a bench by the harbor on the 4th day. She asked how it was going. I told her it was quiet. She laughed and said, "That sounds right." She was the unexpected part of all of this. The sister-in-law, I'd always kept at a polite distance because I'd categorized her with the rest of them. And it turned out she'd been watching everything from the outside just as clearly as I had from the inside, and had her own version of the same slow exhaustion. We talk now, regularly. That's something I didn't expect to get to keep. The last thing I'll say about Theo, he got the rental he applied for. Apparently his father co-signed. That's not my problem anymore. And Joel, we're working on it. Some days the progress is real, and some days I look at him across the dinner table we eat at alone now. Just the two of us. And I feel the distance between who we used to be and who we're trying to become. And it's significant. But we're in it together in a way we weren't before, even when together meant him enabling things he shouldn't have. We talk differently now. He asks instead of assuming. I tell him instead of absorbing. It's not the same as before. It's not supposed to be. The last shared document I deleted was a folder called Family Expenses that I'd kept on a shared drive Joel and I both had access to. It had subfolders going back to 2020. I sat with it for a moment before I dragged it to the trash. Not from sentiment, just acknowledgement. That folder represented something real. Years of quiet calculation, of holding things together with both hands while everyone else reached in. I emptied the trash. I closed the laptop. Then I made dinner. Just for us, nothing elaborate. Pasta and a salad and the good olive oil from the Italian grocery on Lakeshore. And I sat down at my own table in my own kitchen and ate it in the particular piece of a woman who finally stopped being cheap.